Can you listen to podcasts in a Google search? And is it important for podcasters? Let's go ahead and answer that question coming up next. Hey there, podcaster. My name is the Shannon, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer. And today's video is brought to you by my 6 clever ways to monetize a podcast ebook. If you're getting serious about trying to monetize a podcast, go ahead and download this ebook because it's going to give you the steps that you need and the opportunities that you're looking for to monetize your own podcast. The link for that ebook is down in the description below, so go ahead and check it out today. So today we're talking all about whether or not you can listen to podcasts inside of a Google search. And this is something that I think some podcasters say, well, is this even really relevant for me? And I'm going to answer the question for you right now real quick. Yes, it's going to be very relevant for you. Now let's talk about a article that Google had posted on their website about podcasts in search results. And as of this recording, it was a couple weeks ago, so I'm a little late on this, but I think it's still going to be relevant whenever someone does a search and finds this particular video on YouTube. So let's talk about that article real quick. And what Google has said is that now you can find podcasts in Google search results. So if you put in CrossFit podcasts, you're going to be served a certain number of results along with web pages, news stories, videos, and now podcasts that all relate back to CrossFit. So this is something that I think is important for you as a podcaster, whether you're a comedy podcast, a business podcast, maybe you are a true crime podcast. These are all going to be important tips for you to take away, okay? Now, how does this work and how is it going to work for podcasters? Now, right now you can go in, like I said, you can do in a search for a particular podcast, I guess, genre. Let's say your podcast genre is going to be tech tips or tech tip podcast. And when you type that in the search results on the desktop, you're going to end up getting search results that are going to relate back to tech tips, all right? Now, how is this found? Now, this is how I'm understanding it, and I don't know exactly if Google is actually taking the audio and having it somehow on the back end transcribed so that it is relevant for someone to find that search inside of a Google search. But what I am banking on is the fact that Google is taking the title of the podcast and searching also the description of your podcast or the description of that podcast episode, and that is what is populating inside of a Google search. So this is something that I think is very important. So right now you can put in, CrossFit podcasts or radio podcasts or healthy eating podcasts, and you'll see a series of results, right? Soon you're not going to need podcasts. Soon results are just going to show podcasts along with video results and web page results. This is going to be very important for you as a podcaster. And how do we get to have our results showing up in a Google search? Now, before we get into that, I want to add this one more tip for all of you. And I wrote it down right here on my notes. It says here, Google's soon going to be adding the ability for publishers to specify where listeners can listen to podcasts. And this is going to open up a possible monetization model for people. So you can tell people in a search result eventually where they can listen and possibly take them to a subscription-based podcast platform. So just kind of keep that in mind for the future. Now let's talk about the importance of search engine optimization, and this is why I think podcast results are showing up a certain way inside of Google search, okay? Now, one thing that I've always stressed on this particular channel is that you need to create quality show notes. I talk about this in transcription videos. I talk about this in SEO videos. This is something that I think every podcaster needs to be doing. Now, it's going to be more important than ever to have search-friendly titles and descriptions for Google search. And where are you putting these titles and descriptions? Well, whenever you're uploading your podcast to your hosting platform, the title needs to be something that is going to describe the podcast exactly as it's going to be. So if it's LinkedIn tips for social media marketers or LinkedIn tips for realtors, that might be something that Google will latch onto and populate as a result inside of a Google search. But furthermore, you're going to need a quality description. I would say 300 words at most for a quality description that goes into your hosting platform that holds your podcast audio, okay? You want to make sure that those are pretty dense. That's where I think Google is pulling those keywords out and having them populate into a Google search. So this is something that I think is very, very important. So does this mean that you need to get rid of your blog and get rid of putting show notes on your blog? No, it means you need to also put show notes on your blog. So what I would do, and this is how I would do it, is I would create the title of my podcast in my hosting platform form that describes what the podcast is all about. So let's say I turn this video into a podcast and it's listening to podcasts in Google search. Is it important? And that would be the title. And then, of course, the description, let's say, would be the first, I don't know, minute to minute and a half of me talking about Google Podcasts or podcasts found in Google search. And then that might be 300 words. And then I would go ahead and I'd publish it. Then what I would do is I would finish the transcription off of the particular video or audio, and I would make sure that I put all of that on my blog. Because if my podcast isn't always going to show up in search for a particular search query, I want something to show up in a search query, and that might be my blog. So that's going to be something that is important for you. It seems like it's double the work, but it really isn't. You want someone coming back to your website or subscribing to your podcast in any way possible. Podcasters complain a lot about how they're not getting traction to their podcast, how they're not getting an audience to their podcast. A lot of this all deals with the title of your podcast and the description of your podcast. If you're not doing that right now, that's why you're not getting traction. You have to also promote it by pushing it outbound so that you can get more inbound traffic. And when we're talking about inbound traffic is based off of keyword searches. So that's why it's important. You need to have the right keywords that are in your podcast description and podcast title in order to show up on those particular searches inside of a Google search. If you like this video, go ahead and leave it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the little subscribe button down below this video on YouTube and hit the bell button so you can get notified when I drop a brand new video. And if you have questions, or maybe you have any comments about this particular this search query thing that's going on with Google, leave a comment down below, and maybe you have something that you want to share that will help someone else when it comes down to the quality of their podcast and whether or not it is showing up inside of a Google search. I always encourage comments from all of you guys, and it means a lot to me, and I try to get back as soon as I can. And over here on your right-hand side, I'm gonna leave a playlist for you that talks about transcriptions for podcasts, also SEO tips that you can use for your podcast as well. Those videos might be able to help you out as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for subscribing and watching, and I'll see you next time.